She was the woman no one noticed, just the cleaning lady pushing her cart through marble hallways, but behind her quiet steps was a secret powerful enough to shake an entire corporation. And when the day came, she didn't just speak up, she brought the whole room to its knees. When the office lights flickered on at 6:15 a.m., no one noticed the quiet figure who stepped through the rear employee entrance of Silvergate and Rhodes. The building, a shining glass and steel structure in the heart of downtown Atlanta, was still rubbing the sleep from its marble-tiled eyes. Elevators dinged softly. Security guards chatted over lukewarm coffee, but through the hushed stillness, Marcia Daniels pushed her cleaning cart with the same steady rhythm she'd carried for nearly a decade. She moved with purpose, not haste. Her dark navy uniform, crisp and freshly pressed, hung neatly on her 5'4" frame. Her sneakers were clean, laces double-knotted. Her graying hair was pulled back into a tight bun. She looked like what she was, a professional. But no one really saw her. Not the young associate partners who rushed past her with triple-shot lattes and Bluetooth earbuds. Not the HR assistants who politely nodded as they slid into their cubicles, already typing at the speed of panic, and certainly not the executives in glass-walled offices who might glance her way just long enough to wonder whether she was blocking their view of the morning skyline. In their eyes, Marcia was invisible, just the cleaning lady. She didn't mind, or at least that's what she told herself. She had mastered the art of blending in, of moving quietly through high-stress environments without drawing attention. But invisibility had its perks. While others shouted to be heard in meetings or elbowed their way into promotions, Marcia listened. She watched. She absorbed everything, and after nearly 10 years walking these halls, she'd learned more about this company than most of the people earning 6 figures behind its doors. She knew which executives padded their travel reports and who always booked flights to Miami the weekend before quarterly reviews. She knew which middle managers took credit for their team's ideas and who quietly transferred employees who raised complaints. She knew who left passive-aggressive notes in the break room about dirty mugs and who actually stayed late to wash the dishes no one else touched. And she knew all too well how Silvergate and Rhodes viewed people like her. Replaceable, invisible. She heard it in the way employees spoke around her when they thought she wasn't listening. Just last week, as she waited quietly outside conference room 4B to clean up after an early board prep meeting, she caught a snippet from 2 junior executives. "She's just standing there like a statue," one of them muttered. "At least act like you're doing something." They didn't even lower their voices. Marcia had smiled politely when they brushed past her, ignoring the flare of heat rising in her chest. She didn't respond. She never did. Not because she lacked words, but because she understood that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, and Marcia was very good at waiting. What no one in that building knew, not the smug HR director who gave condescending diversity speeches, not the senior partners who handed out fake smiles and stiffer handshakes, was that Marcia Daniels owned more of Silvergate and Rhodes than any of them, nearly 36% of it to be exact. Her late husband, Charles Daniels, had been an early investor, quiet, brilliant, and unassuming. Just like her. Back when the company was operating out of a cramped shared office above a tire shop, Charles had seen something in its model and put every dime of their modest savings into stock. Over the years, those shares had blossomed into a controlling stake. When cancer took him 8 years ago, Marcia had inherited everything. The shares, the dividends, the voice at the table she never used. Until now. But that was the beauty of being overlooked. No one ever noticed when she stayed a little longer in an empty boardroom, picking up half-shredded memos from the trash. No one thought twice when she tidied a desk and saw sticky notes scribbled with names and account numbers. No one paid attention when she overheard whispered conversations behind glass doors. Because in their minds, she was part of the scenery. CEO Preston Hale certainly never noticed her, not really. He was the kind of man who filled a room even when he wasn't speaking. Slick grey hair, tailored charcoal suits, and a voice like a courtroom gavel. He believed in results, in numbers, in dominance. People respected him out of fear, not admiration. He walked fast, talked louder than necessary, and demanded complete loyalty. And when it came to employees like Marcia, he didn't even fake politeness. "Why is she still here?" she'd once overheard him say to the CFO. "She's pushing 70, isn't she? If she drops dead in the hallway, it's going to be a PR nightmare." That comment, made during a late-night budget meeting, was followed by chuckles. Marcia didn't flinch. She emptied the trash can beside the conference table and kept moving. But she remembered. She always remembered. Marcia had watched this company evolve. She saw bright, eager interns reduced to tears after being berated in front of their peers. She witnessed security escorting a single mother out of the building after she dared to file a complaint about unpaid overtime. She watched bonuses balloon for executives while entry-level salaries were frozen for years. She saw janitorial staff written up for lingering too long in the break room, while HR managers took 2-hour lunch, and worst of all, she saw the silence, the way no one ever said anything. Because to speak up was to become a target, and once you were a target at Silvergate and Rhodes, your days were numbered. Still, Marcia endured, not because she was weak, but because she was preparing. Every sideways glance, every dismissive tone, every accidental spill she had to clean without so much as a thank you, it all went into her mental vault. Her patience wasn't passive, it was strategic. Marcia didn't want revenge, she wanted reform. And reform takes time. That morning, as she polished the brass handles of the executive elevator, she overheard a conversation between two department heads exiting the stairwell. "Preston's untouchable," one of them said with a laugh. "The board eats out of his hand. That shareholders' meeting next month, rubber stamp, like always." The other one nodded. He could torch this place and they'd still give him a bonus. They disappeared down the hallway, their voices fading, but the words lingered in the air like smoke. Marcia's class paused mid-swipe. She knew better. Preston wasn't untouchable. He just hadn't been touched. Yet. As the office filled with more voices, more footsteps, and more indifference, Marcia moved from floor to floor with quiet precision. She took mental notes. She examined discarded papers. She listened. No one questioned why she was there. No one asked what she knew, and that was exactly how she wanted it. By the time her shift ended at noon, she had gathered 3 more pieces of the puzzle she'd been assembling for years, tiny, innocuous fragments to anyone else, a printer log, a carelessly tossed draft contract, a forgotten expense report. But to Marcia, they were gold. She wheeled her cart back to the supply room, locked the door behind her, and exhaled slowly. Her face, calm as ever, barely moved, but behind her eyes, something stirred. She pulled out a worn notebook from her bag. Each page was meticulously organized. Dates, times, names, offenses. She added today's findings in tidy, looping script. Then she circled a date already marked in red, the next shareholders' meeting. 4 weeks away. She closed the book gently, as though sealing something sacred. The time was drawing near, and soon the people who thought she was nothing more than a cleaning lady would discover the truth. Marcia Daniels wasn't invisible. She was watching. She was waiting. And she was ready. The notebook closed with a quiet thud, but the weight it carried echoed through Marcia's chest long after she slipped it back into her tote. The sun was dipping low behind the skyline of Atlanta, casting a golden glow against the mirrored facade of Silvergate and Rhodes. Outside, the sidewalks buzzed with post-work chatter and the scent of food trucks beginning their evening shift. But inside, the building held a different kind of energy. Quieter, colder, and for Marcia Daniels, more dangerous. She had marked the shareholders' meeting in red ink weeks ago, but tonight something shifted. The moment she overheard those 2 men laugh. It wasn't the first time she'd listened to heartless words drift from behind closed doors, but this time the cruelty wasn't just careless, it was deliberate, proud. "They really think they matter," one of them had said, chuckling over his half-empty tumbler of scotch. "Let them cry about it. We've got to cut the fat somewhere." The other man responded with a low snort. "And if they complain, fire 'em. What are they going to do, tweet about it?" They laughed again. the sound muffled by the thick office walls, but clear enough to burn its way into Marcia's mind. She had been standing just outside the lounge with her mop bucket and gloves, frozen mid-step, heart hammering in her chest, not with fear, not with surprise, but with clarity. That was it. That was the moment she knew. She wasn't waiting any longer. When she got home that night, Marcia moved on autopilot. She hung her uniform with care, made a pot of chamomile tea and fed her cat Rufus, who brushed against her ankles like clockwork. But she didn't turn on the television. She didn't reach for her favorite gospel station on the radio. Instead, she sat at the small kitchen table Charles had built for them 25 years ago and pulled the notebook back out. The tea went cold as she began writing. Names, dates, quotes, department names. She opened the manila envelope tucked in the bottom drawer of her file cabinet, where she'd stored years of miscellaneous papers. Emails printed and discarded by careless execs, copies of contracts tossed in recycling bins, meeting memos left behind during late-night strategy sessions. Most people didn't think twice about what they threw away. Marcia did. She reviewed every page like a surgeon preparing for operation. By midnight, the folder had grown thicker. By 2 a.m. she had a blueprint, and by dawn she was on the phone. The first call was to Gwen Baldwin, a civil rights attorney she hadn't spoken to in over 6 years. Gwen picked up after 2 rings. "Marcia Daniels? Girl, it's been a minute. How are you?" Marcia didn't waste time. "I'm ready to make something happen," she said. "I need your help." Gwen went quiet. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "Tell me what you've got." The next few days passed in a blur. Marcia reached out to people she trusted, people Charles had known, respected, former employees who'd left Silvergate and Rhodes with severance packages and sealed lips, a financial analyst who had been let go after raising questions about missing funds, a junior associate who'd been pushed out after reporting harassment. One by one they agreed to talk. Some were hesitant, some were angry, some were scared, but all of them had stories, and Marcia was listening. Each night, after work, she met with them in coffee shops, on park benches, and over Zoom calls, with cameras off and voices low. She built a file so detailed, so airtight, even the best lawyers money could buy wouldn't be able to spin it. But she knew evidence wasn't enough, not in a place like Silvergate and Rhodes, not with a man like Preston Hale at the helm. Preston had built his kingdom on intimidation and polish. He was the kind of man who could smile while setting a fire and convince the crowd he was warming their hands. People didn't just follow him, they feared him. And fear had kept good people silent for far too long. Marcia wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Still, she knew this wouldn't be easy. Every morning, she pulled on her uniform like armor and walked through those doors with her cart and her composure. But beneath the calm surface, she was working. Watching. Calculating. She timed when certain offices emptied out, when confidential documents were carelessly left unattended, which computers were left unlocked during lunch. Not to steal. Marcia wasn't a criminal, but she knew how to piece together the truth from scraps. The Friday before the board meeting, she found the final puzzle piece. It was a printed itinerary tucked between 2 fast food napkins on a partner's desk. An off-the-books weekend retreat in Hilton Head, listed under vague client development. Marcia knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. She photographed it, documented who was listed, and added it to the folder. When she left that night, the city was buzzing with Friday night energy. But Marcia didn't feel tired. She felt steady, like the storm just before the break in the clouds. Back home, she laid everything out across her bed. The folder had grown thick and heavy, its edges creased from weeks of handling. She placed it in a clean leather portfolio, Charles' old one, and zipped it shut. Then she stood in front of the mirror. She didn't look like the woman people ignored in the hallway. She looked like a force. Strong, clear-eyed, certain. She didn't rehearse a speech. She didn't need to. The truth didn't need practice, it only needed to be told. The weekend passed with quiet resolve. She went to church Sunday morning, sat in the back pew and whispered her prayer into the stained glass light. "Give me strength, Give me peace, and let them finally see. On Monday, the building buzzed with its usual blend of ego and espresso. Marcia moved through the halls, unnoticed, as always, but this time she wasn't bothered by it. She didn't need their attention. In 72 hours, she'd have their full focus, every last one of them. As she stood outside the conference room that morning, waiting for the meeting to end so she could clean, she watched Preston Hale through the glass. He was holding court, gesturing with his signature arrogance, making jokes that only people who feared him laughed at. He didn't see her. He never had. But that was about to change. The day of the meeting was almost here, and when it came, Marcia Daniels wasn't just going to open a door. She was going to walk through it, and bring the entire system down with her. Wednesday morning arrived, cloaked in its usual rhythm. The hum of elevators, the shuffle of polished shoes on marble floors, the low drone of voices over lukewarm coffee. But beneath the routine pulse of Silvergate and Rhodes, something had shifted. For most, it was just another day, another quarterly report, another meeting to fake enthusiasm for. But for Marcia Daniels, it was the day everything changed. She woke before sunrise, not because she had to, but because her spirit wouldn't let her sleep. She laid her clothes out with quiet deliberation, not her uniform this time, but a navy butyl blazer, tailored black pants, and the modest gold pendant her husband had given her on their 25th anniversary. She didn't look like the woman who wiped fingerprints from glass doors or scrubbed coffee stains from the break room sink. She looked like someone ready to take back everything they said she wasn't. The leather portfolio sat on the kitchen table like a silent ally, filled to the brim with documentation, photographs, financial records, and signed testimonies. She reviewed each page once more before zipping it shut, her hands steady. No second guesses, no hesitation. She fed Rufus, poured herself a single cup of black coffee, and whispered a simple prayer beneath her breath. Let the truth speak louder than fear, and with that she walked out the door. Not as the janitor, but as the rightful owner of the company that had tried for years to pretend she didn't exist. At 9 a.m. sharp, the boardroom on the top floor buzzed with energy. The quarterly shareholders' meeting always brought a particular brand of pompous swagger, custom suits, polished smiles, and rehearsed enthusiasm. Preston Hale stood at the head of the long mahogany table, delivering his usual song and dance about market dominance and projected growth trajectories. No one noticed the soft click of the side door opening. No one turned when the woman they'd ignored for years stepped inside. Marcia moved with grace, each step echoing like punctuation marks in a room full of white noise. She pushed a small cart forward, not filled with cleaning supplies this time, but with pitchers of water, glasses, and her leather portfolio resting silently beside them. Her presence didn't register. Until she spoke. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but unshakably firm. It sliced through the room like a clean break in glass. Heads turned. Preston paused mid-sentence, blinking in confusion, before his expression twisted into a condescending smirk. "We're in a closed meeting," he said, waving her off with a flick of his hand. "Please come back when we're done." Marcia didn't move. "I believe I belong here more than anyone else in this room," she said evenly. A ripple of discomfort traveled around the table. Some board members shifted in their seats. Others exchanged confused glances. Preston stepped forward, his voice sharp. "I don't know who you think you are, but I think I'm the majority shareholder of Silvergate and Rhodes," she said, lifting the portfolio and placing it squarely at the center of the table. "And I have a few things we need to discuss." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was stunned. Disbelieving, Marcia opened the folder with precise hands and began to speak. She didn't shout, she didn't perform. She simply laid out the truth, piece by piece, like a woman building a case that couldn't be ignored. She presented documentation of financial misappropriation, expenses labeled client development that covered private retreats and personal luxury purchases. She listed names of employees wrongfully terminated, with time-stamped emails and supporting testimony. She included patterns of systemic discrimination, ignored harassment complaints, and promotions doled out to cronies while qualified candidates were dismissed without explanation. With each page, each calmly spoken sentence, the room grew colder. The arrogance on Preston's face faded into something else, first disbelief, then anger, and finally fear. "You can't just waltz in here and accuse me," he started, his voice cracking with desperation. "Actually," one of the board members interrupted, his voice low, "she can, and I'd like to hear the rest." Preston stared at the man, stunned. For years he had these people wrapped around his finger. Now he was watching it unravel. One by one the board leaned forward, reviewing the documents Marcia had brought. A finance chair whispered something to the legal advisor. Another member began flipping through her printed evidence with growing concern. Preston took a step back, his hands gripping the edge of the table like it could anchor him. Marcia met his eyes then, calm and steady. "I've watched you use this company like your personal playground," she said. "I've watched good people suffer while you profited. I've listened to your insults, endured your silence. And now, I'm using the power you never imagined I had." She took a deep breath and looked at the board. "As majority shareholder, I'm calling for a vote to remove Preston Hale as CEO of Silvergate and Rhodes, effective immediately." A murmur swept through the room. The vote was swift. One by one the hands went up, some hesitantly, others with conviction. And then it was done. Preston was out. The man who once ruled by fear now stood paralyzed by it, staring at the colleagues who had once cowered under his command. "You can't do this," he whispered. Marcia straightened her back, but I just did. Security was called. As Preston was escorted out of the building he once controlled, a strange quiet settled over the room. Less like defeat, more like awakening. The rest of the day unfolded like a storm breaking over dry ground. News traveled fast. By lunchtime, whispers had filled every hallway, every break room. "Did you hear? The cleaning lady fired the CEO. She owns the company. All this time." But for once, the whispers weren't mocking. They were curious, respectful, even reverent. Marcia didn't waste time. The next morning she arrived not with her cart, but with a plan. She met with HR, laid out new standards for transparency and accountability. She reinstated workers who had been unfairly terminated. She ordered a full audit of executive expenses. She sat down with janitorial staff and really listened to their experiences, their frustrations. Within weeks, salaries were adjusted. A third-party ethics firm was contracted to investigate unresolved complaints. Town halls were scheduled. Every department, from interns to senior management, was invited to speak. And people came cautious at first, then eager, then hopeful. One afternoon, Marcia stood near the front desk, chatting with a young administrative assistant who had been on the verge of quitting a month earlier. As they spoke, a woman walked by, one of the execs who had never looked at Marcia twice before. She stopped mid-step, turned and said softly, "Thank you for what you did." Marcia nodded. "It wasn't just me," she replied. "Change only works when people are ready to see it." That night, as the sun dipped behind the city, Marcia stood outside the building she had once entered in silence. Now, her presence carried weight, not because of revenge, but because of renewal. She had taken a place built on arrogance and made it about people again. No applause, no spotlight, just change. Marcia Daniels had spent 10 years being invisible, but in the end, she didn't need to shout to be heard. She let truth do the talking, and it spoke louder than anyone expected. Marcia Daniels wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. She didn't carry a title, wear a suit, or sit in a corner office. She didn't command attention when she walked into a room. Most people didn't even look her way. But maybe that's exactly why her story matters, because in a world that often values volume over virtue, Marcia reminds us that true strength is often quiet, patient, and deeply rooted in integrity. For years she was overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed, but she never allowed their ignorance to define her worth. Instead of reacting with anger or seeking revenge, she watched, she listened, she prepared, and when the time was right, she spoke. not to tear people down, but to build something better. The lesson here is simple, yet powerful. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume that a person's worth is tied to their title, their wardrobe, or how loudly they speak. Everyone you pass by, especially those who seem invisible, has a story, a strength, a purpose. We also learn that power isn't always about control. Sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones who choose to wait, who choose to act with thoughtfulness, who understand that justice doesn't come from rage, but from truth, courage, and perseverance. If you're someone who's been overlooked, unheard, or dismissed, let Marcia's journey be your reminder. You are not powerless. Your story matters. Your presence has value. And one day, the world may need exactly your kind of strength to change everything. To those listening right now, whether you're driving home after work, folding laundry, or sipping coffee before a long day, I want to thank you. On behalf of the team here at US Justice Story, thank you for choosing to spend this time with us. Your support means everything. By listening, by sharing, by reflecting, you're helping us bring these untold, powerful stories to light and maybe, just maybe, inspiring someone else to find their voice too. If this story touched your heart or made you see the world a little differently, we'd love for you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And if you know someone who could use this message, someone who feels unseen, send it their way. Sometimes, the right story at the right time can be exactly what someone needs to keep going. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never forget, justice begins with being seen.